Welcome everyone. My name is Philippa Bindley. I'm Head of Customer Service at Norfolk Chamber of Commerce. Today's Chamber webinar is on online meeting and event management skills, and it's presented by Graham Phelps. Any relation to Michael Phelps, the swimmer?
No, I wish. I'm afraid not. No.
Graham is from Brilliant Customer Services and is a member of Norfolk Chamber. Graham was just saying how he recently moved to Norfolk and was looking forward to attending his first Chamber event, and then unfortunately lockdown happened. So we hope to resume events in the new year. And
the Chamber owe me a breakfast, I think.
You do. You're fry up. So before I hand over to Graham, we've got the chat function at the bottom, so please ask myself anything, or if you want to say good morning, as I can see people have already, to each other. So you can speak to all panelists, or you can speak to attendees as well. And there's also the Q&A function, so if you want to ask any questions, please pop them on there. And then I believe at the end, Graham, you'll be answering questions.
I will indeed, yes.
Brilliant. So what I'll do is I'll just turn my video off and turn my audio off so I'm not a distraction, and hand over to Graham.
Thank you very much, Philippa. Well, good morning, everybody, and it's great to be here online, talking to you all, and having this opportunity to share some ideas with you. I've broken the session into a number of parts, and I've put lots of information. If, though, you want more information about any particular topic, please send a question through the system here, or send an email afterwards, and I will get back to you via Philippa. So a few points before we start, sort of setting the scene, if you like. First of all, we all talk about this new normal. Well, online meetings have been around for quite a long time, but now it seems in the last few months every meeting is an online meeting. And I don't know about you, but it does become quite effective. It's certainly efficient. I probably save around 10 hours a week of driving around and sitting on trains and buses. I've also found for client meetings, it's actually easier to get a meeting. And if you follow a few guidelines, which I'll cover today, you can still get an awful lot done. So my suggestion is, you may not like this type of meeting, it may not be your favorite, but we all have to learn to use it. Groove. My thought is it's probably about 50% of the meetings we have will still stay online, even in a few years when we all go back to meeting rooms and events and so on. In terms of the meeting today, well, as I said, we can chat, we can send emails. Just to give you a context as why I am qualified to do this talk today. Well, I spent 30 years of my life of carefully honing my classroom skills to be the very best that they could possibly be. And then earlier this year, it just came to a grinding halt, and I had to turn myself into becoming an online trainer, a Zoom ninja, as someone called it. And I use it daily. Today I've got 4 or 5 one-hour coaching sessions. Next week I've got 4 days of Zoom training, each day around 7 hours of presentation and training. In between that, I actually officiated at a wedding in Cambodia with 120 people around the world. I've helped people to facilitate funerals, speed dating, conferences and seminars, all on Zoom as a sort of an MC. So I'm going to share with you some real world tips and tricks today. I've also written a few books. As you can see, many of these are about classroom training. Limited market now, but who knows, one day it'll all come back perhaps. But let's get started. Let's get into what this is all about. So our goal is to make our online meetings more engaging, more interactive, and ultimately more productive. The 6 topics I'm going to cover is the basics of how to make it work, ways of getting interaction, a few ideas on taming the technology, changing the way you talk, getting better with the visuals and refining your content, and then finally I'll share with you some of my best tools. And I use Zoom a lot, but I do use others as well, so I'll share with you my best features from those programs. Now, before we started, people sent me a couple of questions. The first one was, how do you make it more engaging? Simple answer, use what I call forced discussions. We will have all have done that trick where you say, so does anybody have any questions? And you're met with a deafening silence, with tumbleweed strolling across the internet, rolling across the internet. So you have to ask people specifically by name a really good question. The second tip is to keep your energy up and then keep things moving. Another question somebody sent me, and if you sent me this question, you'll recognize it, is what about the networking, the bit around the coffee break, you know, when everyone's munching biscuits or eating a nice FEB? How do you do that online? Well, you do that by using breakout rooms. They are brilliant. It's the only way I was able to take skills training, which is basically sales and customer service training, and put it into an online context. All the planning, the role play, the review and the discussion is now done in breakouts. And if you put people into groups of 3 or 4 people, they do interact in a very different way than a meeting forum of 8 or 9. And if you've tried that, you'll know what I'm talking about. And the last question that I was sent was, you know, obviously the technology, the internet going in and out, and also how do you modify training to go online? Well, a couple of tips here. First of all, switch every device in the house that uses the internet, turn it off, go to your neighbor's house, ask them not to use the internet while you're online. It does go in and out, of course. I live in a part of Norfolk where we don't have mainline internet. I've got an aerial on the roof, so if I lose you, I'll dial back in. But you redesign your training. You have to start again. You cannot simply take a course or a lesson that you used to do in a classroom and put it online. Whether it's a yoga course or a language lesson, you have to redesign it. And I'll give you some tips on that. Now, here are things to watch out for. Now, I don't know if you're guilty of any of these. I was watching the Queen do that talk the other day on Zoom. That was just amazing, right? And someone had prepped her because she wasn't doing any of this. Bad backlighting. Don't sit with the window behind you. Make sure your face is lit. Get a decent sound going. Don't talk while you're on mute. I mean, how many times do people go, oh, no, you're on mute. I can't hear you, right? Don't eat. Because people like me wear headphones and it's very noisy. Don't multitask, especially if you're the host. Don't talk too fast. Look at the screen, look at the camera, not the screen. There's nearly a mistake. And don't talk too long. Keep things moving. So if you need to talk to me, there's my information. Now, online meeting skills. Let's get into this now. How do you make it work? Well, the first thing you do is you bring your own energy. You prepare properly. Everything you need to have and share in the meeting, you need to have open, and everything you don't need, you need to have closed. And you need to change your communication style. Let me explain. Any meeting, live, online, or wherever, needs an agenda. The first thing you should do once you've done a bit of small talk and welcome everybody is share one screen which has an agenda on it. This will focus everybody as you go through. There's a 3-minute rule that I heard about when I was researching all this a few months ago, and it, generally speaking, is pretty true. Try not to take more than 3 minutes on a particular topic and keep moving quickly. There's the Aristotle triptych technique of tell them, and tell them. It's a bit like the news, really. Here are the headlines tonight, then there's more detail, and a summary at the end. The beginning and the end of any topic is the most important. Always ask for opinions and ideas, and don't be afraid to be flexible with the breaks, shall we say. If you sense people need to break or you need to regroup yourself, then do so, even if it's just for a few minutes. It's kind of important to do that. These are more subjective. These are my ideas, really. I think it's important to dress for work, even if the only person that's going to see you is the cat and the dog. I know more about the audio visual settings in my computer and Zoom than I ever wanted to, but that's important too. Getting on with people, gaining rapport is different. And you can see the other points here we've more or less covered. But particularly the last one, you need to project your voice and your communication with more consciousness than you may have done in an everyday ordinary face-to-face meeting. Now, many of us have been using this medium for quite a long time now, and you've learned these things, but one of the things I may want to do today is just remind you how important some of these points are. Now, hopefully we're getting some points going here. The next part is really looking at the details in more, and I'm going to give you some examples of things as we go through this. So I mentioned the idea before of forced questions, where you're, instead of saying, does anyone have any questions, and then getting tumbleweed, is be much more proactive in this. So let's pick out a few points. When you start a meeting, if it was in a meeting room, you'd probably have, you know, what some people call banter or small talk. Talking about the journey here doesn't really work online. I've found that out. And I do a lot of work overseas, and I found out if you're online to someone like Dubai and you ask them what the weather's like, you get this kind of puzzled, what? The weather's sunny. It's always sunny. We're in Dubai, Graham. Oh, yes. So you've got to be ready to get the small talk, but it's really important to make sure you build that bit of rapport at the beginning so that when you ask later in the meeting a question, you know who the talkative people are, and you've kind of warmed them up, right? Because nobody wants to go first on these online meetings. So you also need to have people's, if you can, videos switched on, and we'll talk about that a bit later on. And you need their name in front of you because you're going to use their name and you're going to target questions. Now this goes against what I've learned in classroom training over the years. It was always seen as be bad facilitation and bad training if you picked on people when you began a group discussion. So you'd turn to the group and say, so does anybody have any thoughts on this? How would you do it? And you maybe make some eye contact and some encouraging looks towards somebody and wait for someone to begin the response. That doesn't work so well online. So what you need to do is use their name and you ask them specifically. But you need to ask the people that you know are most likely to contribute, and then go round the boxes one by one, or as many as you can, asking for input. And the question needs to be an open question or a high impact question of some kind, rather than just the start with a verb yes or no answer question, right? Active listening is interesting online. Usually active listening is done with our face, our eyes, our body language, leaning forward, and just that sense that someone is absorbed by what you're saying. Online you have to kind of exaggerate it. That's really, oh, that's interesting. Oh, that's good. Because even if they're paying attention to you and your face, which let's be honest is unlikely because they're probably doing something else, is you're that big. Right? You're not very large. So you need to exaggerate your listening and compliment them. And here's a little tip I found is you always encourage what you want more of. So if somebody does contribute a question, an answer to a question, and you say, hey, that's a really good observation, that's great, and you ask another probing question about what they've said, and you say that, yeah, that's really impressive, thank you, who else? Not does anyone else, but who else wants to share an opinion on this? Now, the reason why you have to use their name is because I can't look at you. All I can do is look at the camera like I'm doing now, and hopefully most of you have the experience that I'm making eye contact with you. But I can't look at just one of you. I have to use your name to get your attention. So this is a really powerful way of getting more interaction and engagement with people. You have to encourage them. This is what I've developed as a sort of a little rule of mine in terms of online meeting etiquette. Timing, make sure there are any rules are established at the beginning, always be polite. If someone starts talking when somebody else is, just mute them or ask them to wait. Pay attention, that means active listening. Unmute and look at the camera. This is, as I said, a big problem. So I always make sure that I unmute myself. And in the building, the workplace, the house that you're working in, of course, people are making noise. They're going to come in. They're going to disturb you. Try and just get an understanding that while you're on an important meeting, they don't disturb you. You know, put like one of those things like they have in hotels on the door handle outside. But I heard some very funny things over the last few months. There was one last week where he kept having this bellow from downstairs saying, "Dad, are you still on the computer?" And then just recently there's somebody who was trying to get their computer configured and didn't realize their sound was on, and this torrent of bad language came out before the host could mute them, which was funny and embarrassing all at the same time. So my personal rule is you just get online early, and I'm going to say this somewhere else as well. Even if it's not your meeting, just make sure you're there, you've checked everything, everything's working and ready. The number of times I may have to reboot the computer or plug in the microphone, those kind of things, it's very, very important. When it comes to interaction, well, you need to show people a smile. You need to ask for more information, clarify, but don't be afraid to say, no, we're not going to cover that today. And you've got to learn to interrupt. Interruption is normally something we're quite shy at in a British culture. Other countries don't have any problem with this. But in our culture, we have this sort of idea of exaggerated manners in groups of people. So, may I ask you, would you mind? Oh, thank you so much. Would you like a cup of tea? I'd love a cup of tea, thank you. And we're always being so polite. And it's now difficult to be polite because so much of that is in the nuance of communication to do with facial expression and eye contact and body language, right? So I love this thought when I was doing my training a few months ago. And I went on a course for basically presenters, television, media presenters. And they said, if people can't see your smile, if they can't see your teeth, you're not really smiling. So I sat there for a couple of hours just practicing smiling like this, right? And it's kind of true because you're very small, so you need to project much more. Now, probably some of you are thinking, okay, how do you interrupt nicely? I would love to be able to do that, right? And this is a great technique I'm going to share with you now. And I've known this for years. And we used to teach it to people on the telephone, and it works really well in online meetings too. Okay. Okay, let's go on to the interruption one. Where's it gone? I've lost it here. Okay, let me share this with you, right? So I'm just going to stop my screen for a minute. And this is how you interrupt. You say their name. You give a reason. You then apologize and then ask a question. And those two in the middle can be switched around. So you might say, Dave, I need to find out a little bit more about what happened yesterday. I'm sorry to stop you, but could you just go through that again, please? So the name gets the attention, the apology softens it, the reason means it's something else, it's not them, and the question or the let's park that later will defer it and move them forward. So it's a really good technique. Let me just go back to that again. Is make sure you use their name, that gets their attention. Apologize, I'm really sorry to stop you, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to find out a bit more, or could you go through that, or can you tell me the number, and then ask a question. It's very, very important little technique. It's how you keep meetings on track. Now, when you ask a probing question, by the way, the same thing is true. I'd like to find out, I need to know what's the purpose of the question. Ask the question targeted to the individual, but then ask a run-on or a follow-on question. Now, normally in a face-to-face meeting, we'd nod and we'd do all that kind of, oh, really? That doesn't really connect as well over the internet online. So we have to ask specifically, okay, Dave, that's a good point. Can you tell me a bit more about that? Or can you give me an example? Or could you just talk me through the details there? Because they can't pick up your non-verbal cues, as it were. Now, oops, going the wrong way. So let's go back forward. Now, the one that I think a lot of people want to get from these sessions is the technology, right? So you're going to have to make friends with the technology. And I don't know where you are on the scale of, being like a genius geek level 10 or 1, um, you know, praying every morning when you switch the computer on it's going to work for you, right? If you use Zoom, there are a lot of settings embedded in the platform, and it is worthwhile taking time to learn those. I've done a couple of videos that I share with people, step by step, all the different settings, whether you allow people to chat or not to chat, whether you make them mute when they arrive, and all these things, right? Teams is slightly simpler, as are some of the others, but then they don't have quite as much functionality. So, people often ask me about the security of these systems. Well, they are pretty secure. The daftest thing you can do, though, is share a link online on social media to a meeting. You will get people trying to bombard you, but if you can, always use a meeting room and possibly a password. One of the little known features of Zoom, although it's getting better known now, is the registration page function, and this allows people to take a link to register, and even for an internal meeting or a client meeting, these are really, really useful things. Okay, let's go through a few ideas, and I'm going to pause, as I said, in a few minutes and get some questions going. Now, 5 areas of concern about technology. First of all, it is better to use a headset. You do feel like you're an escapee from a call center or an air traffic controller on leave, but trust me, not only do you hear better, people listening will enjoy your voice more. If you don't want to use a headset, you can get something like this. This is a podcast mic by Rode. It's not that expensive for the amount of technology in it, and I will often use this session. Also, you can see in the picture there, using a photographer's light can also help, but even just ordinary angle poises, or make sure the room is lit. Get a separate camera. It really does make a difference, and put the camera up at eye level. How many times do you see people looking down all the time? So make sure you're at the eye level and you're looking into the camera. Have a background. I've just got a simple backdrop here. I know people who have gone out and bought books for the bookcase, to make it look impressive. And if you can, control the noise in your environment. If you are in a noisy environment, like a busy street with lots of fire engines and things going past, get the habit of muting and unmuting on a regular basis. But certainly it's not much of an investment, but getting a second camera is a really good idea, and also a separate headset. This is a Logitech 320 from memory. I've tried them all. I've got dozens of them. This is my favorite one so far. It's very, very good. Here's a background for you. Now, a lot of systems have virtual backgrounds, and you can just download a picture like this and put that up as a virtual background. This is a good idea, but it does make sometimes your face look a bit odd, and you do go in and out of focus, but it can help if you can't do much about your background. So there's a few points I've already mentioned, and I just want to summarize those. Now, Teams is slightly different. It does things much the same, but you need to take time to learn those if you use that Microsoft tool there. Okay, part 4. How to change your voice. Professor Merabrand many years ago found that 55% of our communication is visual. It's about body language. 38% is voice tone, and 7% is words. This is a challenge if you're working online. What we need to do is watch how and listen to how presenters talk. Whether it's a documentary or a newsreader or someone doing a TED talk. Mimic and learn from the way they speak. It's very similar to the way a pilot might talk. Do you remember airlines? Do you remember flying places? Well, we all will soon, you'll see. But they slow their voice down. Normally under 100 words per minute would be recommended for a newsreader or a documentary presenter. They speak in fragments of 5, 7 or 14 words. Short fragments and then pause. Don't speak in whole sentences. People cannot listen as fast as you can talk. Then you need to use something I call vocal underlining. There is a fancy phrase for this, but this works for me. What does it mean? It means putting a push or a pause around key words in a sentence to make it mean more, to make it more meaningful, that you don't have the opportunity to do with body language. So if I was going to say a sentence such as, I didn't steal the chocolate, it doesn't sound particularly convincing. If I said, I didn't steal the chocolate, or I didn't steal the chocolate, or I didn't steal the chocolate, I've subtly changed the meaning. In a face-to-face situation, I will fix eye contact. I will put an expression on my face to demonstrate, I don't know, some form of commitment or confidence. I have to put it in my voice if I'm online. So look at the camera, speak slightly louder, slightly slower, put your voice inflection down at the end of a sentence. That makes you sound more confident and certain. You'll hear this on the news tonight. You wouldn't have noticed it before, perhaps. Always list things in three. Keep things super simple. Don't talk past the point. Emphasis, like we've mentioned, and interrupt people if you have to. And we know how to do that now. They're going to love you after they get back to work, aren't they? Why do you keep interrupting me? Oh, what on this training webinar? Okay. And just to remind you, this is how you do it. You use their name, you say sorry, give a reason, ask a question and move on. Does this work in a personal situation? Absolutely. Now, finally, let's look at a few other ideas just to catch up. When I mentioned earlier on that if you do any kind of training, you need to redesign what you do. Well, you need to design the training activities and the presentations and so on. You can't just shift what you've done in the classroom into an online forum. So the first thing I would recommend, and this is just my view, you might have a different view, is you need slightly more slides with fewer words and more creative visuals. You need to make them look nicer. You need to have short bursts, and if you're doing a meeting rather than a webinar, you can go backwards and forwards between the screen share and the camera. Good primary colors, nice clear visuals, and you can play videos online very easily once you've followed a couple of little pointers. Let me show you. And by the way, the spotlighting means if you're in Zoom, you can choose to spotlight someone that's speaking or spotlight someone who's not speaking. So I was doing a Zoom session for someone a few months ago on recruitment, and we wanted to make sure the candidate's face was always in the big picture, even if the recruiter was talking, so we could force the override, because Zoom will put whoever is speaking as the main spotlight, so we can override that. Okay, a few tips of useful websites. You'll see this when you get the slides come through. Vidyard, I just found this recently, someone recommended this. Great way of preparing videos that you can then share in an online meeting. Calendly is a great way of creating meetings quickly and easily. Pixabay is a source of free high quality images. Many of the images I'm using in this presentation came from the website Pixabay, and Egg Timer is a facility where if you're going to put someone on a break, you put that on a screen share as a countdown timer and they know when to come back. Works really well. So let's get into the last session, online tools. Now, these are my favorites. They're in Zoom. Most systems have these, by the way. I don't mean to promote Zoom, but first of all, annotation means you can draw and scribble on almost anything you put on the screen. You can put up a whiteboard, you can put a slide, a diagram, a picture, a web chart, a graph, a spreadsheet, anything at all. And you and others can take the pen and mark on it. You can draw arrows and circles and write text and then save it. And it's a really great feature. Backward and forwards chats are also quite good. People can ask you a question, they can chat to each other. You can control that too, by the way. Sometimes it does get out of hand. Breakout rooms, as I mentioned, when you're the host in Zoom, you just click on the button that says create a breakout. It then asks you to decide whether you want the system to create the breakout or whether you're going to do it, how long, and off you go. The best thing is that they can't contact anybody else. They're in their little syndicate room, but you can drop in and chat with them, and you can also broadcast messages while they're working. And you can extend or end the session, the breakout session as well, very easily. Now the polling, let me show you how this works. We're going to do a quick poll now. I'm going to launch a poll, and I want everyone to click on the answer that is closest to what they believe, what they found. So the question is, what software have you used to host online meetings and events? So if you could just tick the one that is the most predominant platform for you, I will share with you the answers in just a moment. Excellent, look at that. Okay, good. So one more person to vote, that's probably me. All right, excellent. So let me end that poll now. I'm going to share this with you. So 58% is Zoom. Microsoft Teams is 30%. Poor old GoToMeetings is nowhere. Google Hangouts, really? I know. It's now called Google Meetings. It's just as bad. I bet that other is probably Skype, which when you think about how predominant Skype was a few years ago, and now it's kind of like nowhere. It's kind of interesting. So Zoom is doing really well because it's a really good system. Here's another quick poll while you're in the polling mood. Very simple, yes, no answer. Have you hosted an online meeting or event yet? Yes or no? Okay, so let me share that with you. There we go. So 80% of people have so far on this webinar have hosted an event, and 20% have yet to do that. You may not do that, but you're going to have more ideas there. So that's a poll. They're very quick and easy to set up, certainly on Zoom. If you don't have the facility of using it within Zoom, use something like, I don't know, SurveyMonkey or Google Forms or Microsoft Forms, and then just put the link on the page, send the link out and put the results on the page. Screen share is truly a great tool, and one of the tips I would give you is let everybody share the screen. Tell them in advance or give them time to prepare something and put the screen share up. It really does make the meeting very interactive. The last tip, and I've learned this to be very effective, is in Zoom you have a choice between, in a meeting context, not a webinar, a panel view or a speaker view. The speaker view means you have one big box with lots of little boxes for all the other participants. A panel view means you see everybody's box equally, everyone's face equally, and that is the best view of all if you are the meeting host. Unless you particularly like looking at your own face, put it onto panel view and you will get the sense of being in a meeting and talking to everybody. Okay, so those are some of my features. Now you can show video, and this is how I would do it. You can embed it within a PowerPoint slide, or you can share it as a separate screen. So here I've got one here. Let's see if this is
scandals happen all the time. The question is, how do democracies respond to those scandals?
And what will it mean for the wider region? I think one of your children has just walked in. I mean, shifting sands in the region. Do you think relations with the North may change?
I would be surprised if they do. Pardon me. My apologies.
What's this going to mean for the region?
My apologies. North Korea,
Right, so that's what happens. That's what you have to do if you're interrupted when you're live on television. And a brilliant piece of professionalism there. He didn't even pause. He just didn't even turn around. He just waited politely and moved on. So next time the cat comes and sits in the keyboard in the middle of a third level interview, or when your CEO is talking, that's how you deal with it, right? Embed the video, but you do need to make sure you've got the sound switched on the system. You can also share sound in the background while people in the waiting room and are chatting as well.
Scandals happen all.
So you can use it anytime. Just drop the video in. It's a very, very useful technique. Now, just some quick recap, and then we'll go into a few questions. Make technology your friend. Take time to learn how everything works and invest in a decent microphone, a decent camera, and maybe get the lights or move the tables or chairs around in the room you're broadcasting from. Always get online and be ready and prepared. Put on the screen, put on the desktop, on your Windows system or your app system, Apple system, what you want to share, and close down everything you don't. Work at interaction, engagement, and rapport. Bring energy into your voice. Sit up straight. The reason why you should dress for success is because it makes you feel differently. It genuinely does, and this is a good thing. All right. So I'd like you to just take a moment now while I look at the questions. What are the key points you're taking away? What are the 2 or 3 things you have found to be the most interesting or the most valuable points? Okay, I'm just going to have a quick glance. We've got a few minutes left. So there's a question here. International conference involves many speakers. Okay, if you're having an event with many speakers, you need to do 2 things. Number 1, let's stop my screen for a moment, is you need to do a rehearsal. Treat it as a live conference, and you need to get a bit feisty with everyone having good sound and good cameras. I did a conference recently for 2,000 people in Saudi Arabia. It's brilliant. I get jet lag without leaving my house, and we had to sort of really be tough with some people, and they didn't like it, saying, we can't hear you. You have to look at the camera. Here's a thing I'll share with you, by the way. Right, this is an advanced technique. Is if you have someone who keeps looking down like this when they're supposed to be a panelist, is you get them to take a piece of paper and you get them to put it in front of the screen with an arrow pointing to the camera, so they can't see anybody on the screen, and all they do is look at the light by the camera. All right. And when you watch the news tonight and you see all these people, dialing in from their dining rooms, whatever it is, the ones that have been briefed will look at the camera, and the ones that haven't are looking at the screen because they're trying to make eye contact with the people on the screen, right? So have a rehearsal, and I will also give you a tip as having an assistant, someone to manage all the technology, definitely. And yes, the polls functionality is a Zoom webinar feature. It's also a Zoom meetings feature. And it's great. You can do them on the fly, by the way. So if people are doing some activity or while they're talking, you can just create a little poll.
And I'm now trying to consciously look at the camera.
Yes, that's right, you are. Okay. So hopefully I've given you loads of ideas and inspired you to go out there and make your meetings magic. So, Philippa, back to you, please.
Yeah, so we've got a few more questions, if that's okay, Graham.
Yes.
So what are your thoughts on webinars without any visuals of the presenter, good or bad?
Bad. Unless your visuals or your slides are great, but do try and put an image up of your face, put your camera on. And by the way, if you start a meeting and people have got their cameras turned off, either first of all, ask them politely, could you turn your camera on, please, at least where you're speaking? And if not, shame them. I had one recently and I said, do you know what it means when people are sitting there with their camera off? It means they're probably in their pajamas. And immediately about 5 people put their cameras on to prove they weren't in their pajamas. But as a panelist, as a presenter, no, people need to see your face. I really believe that.
And with just going back to the international conference virtually, we hold an annual tech conference normally in September, and we're looking at doing that virtually. Actually, we don't want to use Zoom because I feel that the functionality is good for a panel discussion, but there's some better technology out there that's made for kind of larger conferences or exhibitions where you can really profile sponsors as well.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I think Zoom is very good for meetings, networking, and doing webinars or doing panel discussions. But when you've got several elements of an event, you may want to look at enhanced software.
Yeah, I agree. And in fact, I do one regularly I mentioned my Middle East client, and we started off using Click Meetings about a year ago, and it wasn't very good. I did one last week and it was amazing. So yeah, these platforms are improving and changing all the time. So I would definitely do some research and find the right platform. Definitely. Good idea, Philippa. Absolutely.
There's also a question, is the polls functionality just a Zoom webinar feature?
No, it does Zoom meetings as well. And I've seen this pop up in a couple of other platforms now. And you can save the chat, by the way, and you can save the poll results. And polls go down particularly well in lots of these meeting events. Yeah, it's there as a standard in all Zoom platforms. Okay. All right. One question I often get asked is what happens if your meeting overruns? And how do you keep the time? Well, as a host, you have to be kind of very conscious of your timings. If it's a professional event like this, you need to rehearse it. But also, don't be afraid. You'll notice when I was doing my presentation, there was blank slides at certain points. If I'd overrun badly, I would have gone to a blank slide, ended the presentation, summarized my presentation, and ended the meeting. So give yourself an escape route if your meeting is overrunning, because people will just switch off and disappear off the screen if you're not careful, as many of you are doing right now. Okay.
Graham, another question. To play video, do you just embed in your presentation? I have found that the videos go a bit jumpy on Zoom. I think yours was slightly jumpy, but I wasn't sure whether it was your internet or not.
And it's entirely down to the internet of the host. When I'm doing this next week and I'm using quite a few videos, what I do is I send them the link in an email. I ask them, while they're live in the meeting, I ask them to watch the video and then we discuss the points afterwards. So yeah, it usually goes out of sync, and that's a very low res 1 minute video. So you've got to have good bandwidth as a host, not them, you, if you're broadcasting. Yeah.
Do you advocate having a 10 minutes technology test session before the actual training to enable training to start on time?
Yes, I do. Very good point. Yeah, I didn't mention that. Yes, the first few minutes of any meeting is to get people to send you a chat message, to speak out loud, to make sure that they know how to use the technology, to stop and start, and those kind of things. Yeah, very good. And then they put a little exercise in there like an energizer, which gets them to maybe share screen or scribble on something, those kind of things. Good idea. Yes.
So myself and Graham actually had a practice session before then broadcasting this webinar, and that's available on Zoom webinars, and then on Zoom meetings I think you can have a waiting room so you can run through with some of your speakers before then going live as well.
Absolutely. And if you're doing something where people may not be familiar with this technology, then send them out a little crib sheet, a little note, and allow them to practice. Yeah.
The next question is there online training on running polls and chats and how to save content too?
Yes, I've done a number of videos that I'm happy to send out a link to, which are just online on my website, which show people how to record, how to save recordings, also to run polls and run breakout rooms. So you can just watch those. There is some information within the Zoom support settings as well, but they're quite long, so I just done something much shorter. But yeah, recording it is also quite useful, because you can then refer to it later and obviously send it out as well. Yeah.
Another question is when will Microsoft Teams catch up with Zoom?
Well, they've added a few things. I can't comment on that. It's outside of my pay grade. But they have added a few things. But one thing, I have clients who have to use Teams, and we struggle a little bit to get the same level of things of breakouts. They don't have that functionality. We basically have to set up a second meeting or a series of meetings for everybody. Actually, one tip I will make that's reminded me is when you are wanting to recreate the networking functionality of a meeting, is allow people to enter the room and chat to each other online before you start the meeting as a host or a panelist. But I think by the end of this year, you'll see Teams will have all the functionality that Click Meeting or Zooms has. I mean, they are a very smart organization. I was in the IT industry for many years, and you don't mess with Microsoft. You know, they will be the leader within 6 months, I suspect. Okay.
And they've enabled, I think it was quite recently or a few months ago, multiple people on screen now, because I think there was a restriction of how many people you could show on the main screen.
Yeah.
I don't know how many to, but we use Teams internally.
Yeah. Yes, right. A lot of people do. It's a corporate thing. One technique I found, and I've probably finished on this. How long much have we got? We're over about by a minute, aren't we? No.
Yeah.
Right. Last point is one of the tips I found. And this is a challenge to a lot of hosts. They find it very frustrating when people blank their screen, turn their video off, and then start talking or then start contributing. So what I do before I counter their question or answer their answer, I say, you know, Ben, would you mind turning your screen on, please? Could you put your video on? And I wait for them to turn the video on before I continue answering their point. Now, when they're listening, they can turn it off. But when I'm talking to somebody, I want to see them. I'm a bit old school, as you can tell, right? So I think that's really important to make the meeting work. And don't be afraid to do that. You know, it's really important. Good.
Graham, we've still got quite a lot of questions. Would you like to continue to answer them, or would you like to end the meeting? And
well, let's take another 2 or 3 minutes. I'm very conscious of other people's time, so let's take 2 or 3 minutes, and then I will, because the chat and the questions are saved. I will come back to you if you want to email me or send an email with your chat message. We'll get back to you.
And obviously we won't be offended if anyone needs to go.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Okay, so from Gabrielle, we need interpreting services as dual languages. Have you got any advice or pointers? I've been very good meeting interpreted. Others have been bad. So I think she's attended a few good ones. And
okay. I don't know of any. I would look at a website like Fiverr or freelance.com. There's lots of freelancers there, and you can do a test before you use them. I use them for a lot of technical things. So yeah, good websites to find interpreters, definitely.
Any tips for making events unique?
How do you make events unique? Well, I would like to try and make every event unique. So you'll notice that the slides, I do this presentation a lot, but today's slides were slightly different because I used exactly the same format from the information flyer that went out, and I put the logos on. The key to making it unique is to make it feel like a unique experience, and you do that through discussion and chat with your participants in the way that I've suggested, by really getting them to contribute, by asking their names, asking good questions, and kind of forcing them to contribute. Go around the box one at a time. What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? Because you've got to get them involved so they remember this as an experience, not just sitting there listening. In a webinar, it's different. It's a webinar, it's different, of course. Meetings are more interactive.
Yeah. I think it's really knowing what the purpose of the event is, and then looking at the format along with the purpose. I think really helps. As you said, webinars are quite different. I've been on webinars where you can see attendees' screens and have that audio. I think sometimes that's really nice at the start when you welcome people. However, it's hard sometimes when you've got other people's screens. It can be quite distracting for all of the attendees as well. And for some people, it's really hard to, even though the content's engaging, you might have a resting face that doesn't look so engaged as well.
Well,
things going on behind you.
Yeah, I get that. I tell what I've found. Sometimes I do turn off everybody's sound. I mute all participants, because if you are trying to present or run a meeting and there's all this noise, got people chatting and everything else, it's definitely distracting. And sometimes I do turn all the videos off. I can do that in most of the systems because it can be distracting as well. So people eating their breakfast or whatever it is. So yeah.
There's also you have to be aware of security as well. So some of you may have heard of Zoom bombing. and inappropriate content being shared, and how to make your meeting more secure. So I know that this has happened to another Chamber of Commerce, and we were then sent advice about it. So we try and make our meetings as secure, because you don't want an attendee sharing a screen or changing their background or being allowed to have audio where they could potentially share something that's inappropriate and offend your attendees.
Yes, absolutely right. And that's where the waiting room comes in. If
Yeah.
you have a list of attendees, you know, it's like a nightclub. You know, if your name's not on the list, you're not coming in. Do you remember going to nightclubs? No, I'm too old. But no, absolutely. And you do have to be careful when you have a large number of participants, or it's being put out on the internet, in social media. Yeah, and when we were doing the wedding with 120 people from across the world, we had one person simply checking the registrations against people in the waiting room, and luckily we didn't have any problems, but they would have been on it if there had have been.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you advocate sending PPT, which I think is PowerPoint presentation?
Yeah, PPT. I think with the Zoom system, you can only really send PDFs through the share file. Although that keeps changing. I would only ever send PDFs, because it's just the most secure way of doing it, and it doesn't get reformatted at the end. So yeah.
So I think she's put to read at the same time as you, but I think as long as you're sharing your screen as a presenter,
Yeah.
you can then send the PowerPoint as a PDF.
No, absolutely, that's a very good point. I do send. This is actually interesting for training. We still use a workbook. We still send a copy of the slides before the training, so people can follow it on their screen. And this is a great, by the way, safety net. If suddenly you lose the internet, it takes you a few minutes to boot back up again. So yeah, and actually we find people print out the workbook and keep it with them by the side of the computer and make notes as if they were in a training room. It's quite interesting.
And do you have any tips for making hands-on practical training sessions more effective?
Well, the two tips I mentioned is, number one, use lots of breakouts. And put people in the small groups of 3 to 4, or even 2 or 3 people. I even sometimes put people in breakout groups of 1, so they can prepare without any distraction of anybody else. And they work very differently. And the second thing is that bring that energy, just as if you were about to start a presentation in a room. You've got to be projecting your voice, your personality. Use humor, use small talk, make it come alive. And it's hard work. I mean, I found when I first started doing this was extraordinarily tiring, and I couldn't work out why, because I'm sitting down for 6 hours and not pacing around the room. But it is very tiring, because you're having to concentrate so much more. Yes, and you're probably all feeling very tired now. So one more question, Philippa, and we'll let these good people go back to their day jobs.
Brilliant. At which point would you decide to cancel if too much noise or problems with the internet from your end?
Okay. Well, it's never happened, to be honest. But the internet either works or it doesn't work. If it's very particularly bad one day, what I do is I turn my video off and continue with audio only, and that seems to limp along. The bandwidth is stolen by the video. Now Zoom, and I think 1 or 2 of the better ones, do compress the video very well. So that's what I would do. But if you have to, give it 20 minutes, reboot everything and start again. So I have actually said, right, let's take a break, an unscheduled break. I've rebooted everything, reset my router, gone down the street, told everyone to get off the internet, and then restarted. And that tends to work it. So an unscheduled break and come back online.
Brilliant. That's great.
Good.
Right.
Good. Well, thank you so much. Philippa's got a copy of these slides. There's also a recording for this as well. And I'd just love to chat to any of you who have got any more questions we haven't got time to take now.
Brilliant. Do you want to just flash up your contact details, Graham?
I will. Let's do that. Okay. So there we go. My name is Graham Phelps, as you can see. busybeingbrilliant.com is one of my websites, or you can email me at contact@grahamphelps.com.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And thank you all for attending.
Not at all. Thank you, everybody. All right. Have a good day. Have a great weekend. Cheers, everyone. Bye.